if you're watching this stream later, not live, uh, may not kick off the actual content or whatever you want to call it for a bit. I want to go over some of the study material here a little bit. Get myself woke up a little bit. It's a good time to mention the general stuff that God Hour Live is the current incarnation of something that I started a few years ago as GodHour.org, in which all of this was done on its own domain and such. But that took a lot of time and money, and as we don't do fundraising and donations and stuff, I was paying for that, and the money wasn't nearly as hard as the time. It was taking, 1 hour of actual Bible study and streaming, but also 3-4 hours of web design and, so on and so on every day, which was fine when I wasn't working at the time. And now that I do work full time, I can't really cut out an extra 3 or 4 hours of my day. But God Hour itself was formed from the idea that the first hour of the day should belong to God. God should come first in your life, and therefore the first hour of the day, I try to give that to God. And since I've been doing that, whether online or just to myself, I found that to be a very rewarding, very, very good way to have a good day. And I like the way that rhymed. We originally had a format of verse of the day, quote of the day, rhyme of the day, whether it be a poem or song or hymn or something, generally referring to the verse of the day. And our verse of the day was from Romans 8:11. I don't know if you call it the short, but it states, but if the spirit of him that raised up Jesus from the dead dwelleth in you, he that raised up Christ from the dead shall also quicken your mortal bodies by his spirit that dwelleth in you. So I'm just going to ruminate over that for a moment. Oh, hello everybody. Looks like there's a couple people in here now. Okay. I guess they pop in and pop out. In any case, the God Hour Live main course, if you will, not the short, has been on the book of Daniel. I've been going over, we've already gone over the first 4 chapters of Daniel. It's talked about I'll try to summarize a little bit. Uh, King Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel, his place as a Jew in King of Babylon, uh, Nebuchadnezzar's court, and how Daniel's been interpreting dreams for the king. Uh, the king had made a decree that everybody had to worship him at a specific hour, or whenever they heard the music, the instruments would all play, and that meant it was time to worship the golden image. And it never did say what was the image of, but the fact that it was a golden image and not the God of Daniel and so on. Daniel and some of his friends refused to do it, and therefore they were thrown in. Not Daniel. I don't think Daniel was included, but his three friends. Uh, I remember their names: Abednego, Meshach, and the other guy, like the three tenors. The other guy uh, were put into the fiery furnace, which I believe all furnaces are fiery, but the people that threw them in the furnace died or were burnt up, shattered. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. uh, Morning, Roger. Uh, the people that threw them in were burned, but not the three, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Uh, but there was a fourth person seen in the fire, or a fourth image, or a spirit. Uh, and the king said, he was asking, he said, were not three people thrown in there? Then why do I see four? And the fourth one seems to look like the Son of God, as it said in the King James Version here. And that's the best frame of reference, the best translation of the Bible I can refer um, to get as close to its original content without having to learn all those ancient languages. But I have an appreciation of Old English, Middle English, even the Renaissance English. So the King James Version works great for me. I can see it being a little dry and hard to read for a lot of people, but I mean, I obsessively read books in the first place. Uh, but as we were discussing the music earlier in Daniel, the King James Version has listed all these instruments over and over and over, and then it repeated the list of the instruments, and it's repetitive and dry and droning. If you're just reading straight, it can easily bore you if you're trying to approach it as a book or novel, which is not really the way to read the Bible, I found. I mean, there's not, you should, if possible, read it all, but not necessarily from beginning to end, Genesis to Revelation. That anytime I've tried to do it that way, I've burnt myself out by the end of Genesis. Once it gets to the begat, so and so, so and so, so and so, it's like easy to fall asleep and so on. But there are some books that stand out. We did a study of Matthew all the way through, and that's been great. Matthew's a wonderful book to read just by itself as its own book, and so is Daniel. And the beautiful thing about the Bible is you can reread it and find new stuff in it every time. And one other disclaimer, yes, I am smoking. That's why I label these videos not for kids. Um, the point is, I'm just a guy. I smoke, I do things that probably aren't Christian, so to speak. And I'm not ashamed that I sin. I don't, I am shamed by my sins, but everybody sins. So the emphasis is my sins are covered by Jesus. That doesn't give me the power to go out and sin or the right or privilege or whatever you want to call it to go out and sin heedlessly because I've accepted Christ. But I continue to try to point my life in the right direction and to follow these teachings from the Bible and become a better Christian day by day, knowing that my sins are forgiven and been washed clean by the blood of Christ, past, present, and future. And to any that are agnostic or just curious about Christianity, I guess that's probably what separates it from other uh, faiths, religions. Uh, you have a very personal relationship with God and a chance of salvation despite being sinners uh, by accepting the sacrifice of Jesus as being greater than all of our sins, that as the Lamb of God, he was sacrificed in the same manner that lambs were sacrificed to God in the Old Testament, and I guess throughout the New Testament by the Jewish faith. I don't know much about that. I'd like to have a Jewish visitor to our God Hour uh, to talk a little bit about their faith and how it relates. And, I don't like to get political. I mean, the whole Israel and Palestine thing, but we could have discussions on that uh, in a mature civil format. Um, we could discuss the current state of America, and indeed the world, um, as it relates to the coming of Christ again, the second coming, and how most Christians, myself included, feel like we're getting really close to the end here. AI, for one thing, that may be the the last straw or the last maybe what pushes us over. In any case, so I was saying we were talking about Daniel, uh, and then another dream that, well, I don't think we even talked about the first dream, but Daniel interpreted a dream for him, telling how uh, there was a dream about a tree that grew, a very great tree, but that it was hacked down, uh, but left its roots. Uh, this tree had dominion over all the land. It provided everything to the birds and the beast, you know, nutrients, nourishment, as well as shelter. Uh, but then the tree was cut down, but the roots were left intact, and that dream was interpreted as Nebuchadnezzar himself uh, being brought down, having his kingdom taken away from him for a while, for seven times, seven passages of time, which is not really, it's kind of an arbitrary term, but I believe it really came out to be like 7 years, where the king went insane, more or less, became like a beast in his own right, was eating grass and didn't shave or trim his fingernails or anything for all that time, and describes him as looking like he had feathers or claws. Uh, but suddenly he uh, recovered and was given back his kingdom. And the king declared before his kingdom uh, that God took care of all that. Uh, well, there were two dreams we went over, the golden image one and then the tree one. Anyway, we're going to start at Daniel 5 for our discussion today. And the God Hour Live format's kind of new. I'm trying to figure out what the best time to do this every morning is. I've done a few at 8, done one or two at 7, and started this one about 7, streaming this introduction and going back over uh, previous parts of the book. So, Daniel chapter 5 is where we're going to kick off here. And I suppose now's as good a time as any. Daniel chapter 5 begins in my little app of the King James Version, captioned Belshazzar's Feast. Uh, now, Belshazzar, it's a little different. We heard a name very similar to that, being Daniel's name, Belteshazzar, but this is Belshazzar. And in verse 1, Daniel 5 says, Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. Good morning. How are you today, Everly? Um, so I'm guessing, is Belshazzar also Nebuchadnezzar into, different Just as Daniel's name was Belteshazzar and Daniel was Nebuchadnezzar, also Belshazzar kind of makes sense if Belteshazzar might mean something of the king or of Belshazzar. Because I get the impression that Daniel was become like a son to the king as the way the king saw him. He was his trusted advisor, uh, even though they didn't, share a faith, at least always. Um, in any case, Belshazzar, in verse 2, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels, which his father. Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar apparently had passed away, and the new king is Belshazzar, his actual father. Okay, sorry to derail like that. Belshazzar, while he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels, which his father, Nebuchadnezzar, had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines drank in them. As I said earlier, the King James Version can be very dry. If you're just reading, you'll see a lot of repetitive, you know, you could just say they instead of saying his princes, his wives, his concubines over and over. But in any case, verse 4, they drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. These are not, that's not, it's gods plural with a lower case g. In other words, not God, but these lesser gods, indeed false gods, they believed there were, in some faiths still believe there's multiple gods for different realms or fields or, disciplines, like a god of the harvest and so on and so on. I could think back to Greek mythology as a prime example, Zeus, the king of the gods, and Poseidon of the sea, and Hades of the underworld, and so on and so on. Which I find is a very interesting mythology, but just that, a mythology. Um, that would be from the Greek mythos, and then the Romans kind of appropriated all that, and then we named all of our planets after them, and moons and so on. In any case, verse 5, in the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, and the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Verse 6, then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. Okay, well, that's understandable. If I saw a hand appear and start writing on my wall, I believe the joints of my loins might also loose, which I believe is another way of just saying he crapped his pants. And his knees smote one against the other. He was, trembling in fear. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, Whosoever shall read this writing and shew me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. And then came in all the king's wise men, and thankfully this time it didn't list all of those terms, but let's do it. The astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. um, but they could not read the writing, nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Then was King Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonied. And just King James language. I'm sure we can just attribute that to mean astonished. Verse 10, Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house. And the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. There is a man in thy kingdom, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And in the days of thy father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, the king, I say, thy father, made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. Not just all of those, but also the magicians. For as much as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams and shewing of hard sentences and dissolving of doubts were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar, now let Daniel be called, and he will shew the interpretation. I like that she also mentions shewing of hard sentences, which indicates that not only was Daniel very savvy to uh, the whole God thing, um, but clearly very intelligent and able to decipher things for the king. Not just dreams, but anything convoluted and complicated and needing clarification. He brought Daniel to help him with it. In any case, verse 13, Then was Daniel brought in before the king, and the king spake and said unto Daniel, Art thou that Daniel which art of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry? That's interesting turn of phrase there. Whom my father brought out of Jewry. It doesn't just mean that he brought them out of where the tribe of Judah was set up, but brought him away from Jewry, the Jewish faith and all that. But no, he never did lose his Jewness. But he had to balance it a bit because the king had been executing people that didn't worship what he told them to worship. But Daniel was clever enough, as well as protected by the Lord, to navigate this tricky political position he was in and this conflicting faith he had with the king, and clearly endeared himself to Nebuchadnezzar. And indeed, uh, as we finished in Daniel 4, Nebuchadnezzar decreed before his subjects that this God is the God and worshiped him, finally. Um, but moving on, uh, we're, where are we at? Verse 14. I have even heard of thee, that the spirit of the gods is in thee, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in thee. And now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing and make known unto me the interpretation thereof. But they could not shew the interpretation of the thing. And I have heard of thee that thou canst make interpretations and dissolve doubts. Now if thou canst read the writing and make known to me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about thy neck, and shalt be the third ruler in the kingdom. Verse 17, then Daniel answered and said before the king, let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation. Remaining humble, as we are supposed to do. O thou king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom, and majesty, and glory, and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he slew, and whom he would, he kept alive, and whom he would, he set up, and whom he would, he put down. I mean, I'm sure you get it, that everybody in his subjects were terrified because he could, on a whim, kill somebody or give rewards and gifts to people, could give them high office and then take it away the next day. Be their friend one day, enemy the next, and I could see some of that in current or more recent politics. It just seems to be kind of comes with the territory of being a ruler of men. Uh, you have power over the life and death of lots of people, not just, one or two. Like, it's got to go to your head to have that much power, and it's dangerous. And I guess our founding fathers recognized that, and that's why they set up the checks and balances system, the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of our government. And perhaps they also, since America was founded under God, perhaps they felt like the government should also be a trinity or a triarchy. Let it have three heads, two to keep the other one in check at all times. In any case, we're moving along. Verse 20, but when his heart was lifted up and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. Remember, we're talking about Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel's talking to Nebuchadnezzar's son, Belshazzar, about experience he had with his father. In verse 21, and he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beast, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, In other words, he's had to sit out in the rain and mist um, till he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appointeth it, appointeth over it whomsoever he will. And thou, his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this, but hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives, and thy concubines have drunk wine in them, and thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold, of brass, iron, wood, and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know. And the God in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified. Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. Now, the writing on the wall, verse 25. And this is the writing that was written. And forgive me for not knowing this language. Mene, or mene, tekel, a parson. And I don't even know what language that would have been. I presume Hebrew, but only slightly feels like Hebrew that I'm aware of. Uh, but again, I'm not by any means a scholar of ancient Hebrew. Verse 26, this is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. Peres, which wasn't mentioned earlier, thy kingdom is divided. What's that, AK? That was like what? Uh, have I ever questioned my sexuality? I've went through a period of uncertainty, and I've also done things that were sinful uh, along those lines. Uh, and you don't have to feel bad that you've done it. Uh, you can be forgiven for all sins except for blasphemy against the Holy Ghost. If you do not overtly deny God and tell people that there is no God and so on, that's the only sin that cannot be forgiven. Uh, that would be blasphemy against the Holy Ghost. Uh, I would just advise you to pray and tell God. I mean, he knows you feel bad, but I'm sure he'd like to hear it directly from you in private. If you'd like, I will pray for you, or indeed with you, but we don't pray on camera because it's told in Scripture that prayer's meant to be a private thing. But you don't have to feel bad. Um, there is no saint without a past and no sinner without a future. Um, we've all done things that we feel bad about. Um, in particular, before I lost my parents, I said and did some pretty horrible things to them. Uh, I was not worthy of the parents that I was blessed with, and I didn't realize that until right at the end of my mother's life, about how horrible and how much crap. I'm a recovering addict. I was on, you name it, but mostly hard opioids. And by hard opioids, I mean heroin. And I feel bad about that. But I've grown from that. And my mother knew I was on junk. Uh, she tried to deny it or just live in denial of it. Um, even though everybody was telling her, your son's a drug addict, he's a piece of crap. She'd say, no, he's not. No, no, you're just. Anyway, I feel bad about those things, but I don't live in a sense of guilt for them because I've been able to pay it forward and get rid of that part of my life. Um, now, I have to be on my guard because it's easy to relapse, and I've done it a time or two. Um, thankfully, I don't have a drug dealer on my contacts or anything like that. I had to go into treatment and get cleaned up, and I still see a counselor every month about my disease. I don't know if I feel like disease is the right word for it, but it is a condition. It requires taking care of yourself, not letting. It would be easy to get numbers of drug dealers, but I make it a point not to. I have people offering stuff all the time, and I just tell them no, 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 no. Uh, but there's not. That's not to say there's not times where I think about it and remember the good feelings of using, but then I think about the bad feelings, the withdrawals, and the shame that I felt, and it's not worth it. You know, a couple hours of feeling great for several days of feeling miserable, maybe even a year or more of feeling guilty and shame and self-loathing, depressed, and indeed felt suicidal in the past. But I haven't had to do that in quite some time, several years actually. So I hope that helps you. But as we were in the writing on the wall, Tikal, thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. He's talking to Belshazzar, the king. Perez, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet, and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him. that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. In that night was Belshazzar the king of the Chaldeans slain, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. That'd be 62 years old. Remember in verse 28, Perez, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. And then in that night, the king was killed. And then Darius the Median took the kingdom. Presumably, Darius the Median killed or had the king killed and seized the throne. There was a coup, is what I'm hearing. Now, where's the Persian come into this? Persians. Well, that concluded chapter 5. Now, Daniel 6 begins with the caption of the den of lions, Daniel in the lion's den. So, do we want to do another chapter today? That's really the question. I've got no problem with it. It's only 8 o'clock. I don't have to be at work until 2 today. I'm going to continue on. Basically, because I'm intrigued by, even though I just not too long ago did this entire book of Daniel with a offline Bible study group, and I don't remember this part, and again, that's what's fascinating about the Bible is, I mean, we literally studied each chapter for an hour each. So what would that be? 12 weeks, an hour a week with that study group. I should know it back and forth cold if I was to, spent an hour on each chapter of Game of Thrones or something that I like to read as a novel. I could probably tell you everything that happened in those chapters. Indeed, I probably can tell you everything that happens in Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings or any other number of books that I've read several times, except the Bible. I can tell you a lot of it, but I can always open it up and find new stuff to me, even though I've read the words before. Just like today, right here. In any case, the Den of Lions. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was first, that the princes might give accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage. And I'm reading from the King James Version, as I've said, and as is my wont, that the language appeals to me just as a person and as a language. Over the kingdom an hundred, as opposed to over the kingdom 120. and 120. I like that. It's like visiting an antique shop or thrift store and seeing a bunch of nostalgic stuff um, that you can't find anymore. That's kind of how I feel about the language of 1611, Great Britain, uh, where the King James translation was uh, written originally. In any case, where were we at? The king should have no damage. Verse 3, then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. Uh, Daniel was clearly a very charismatic, not only intelligent, but charismatic as well. Because he's already found favor with three kings. Um, and he was born in captivity, from the Jews that they had captured from Jerusalem. And this, I'm just all inferring from what we've read today, how they took all of these things from the churches of Jerusalem that they sacked, gold chalices and such, and the silver and everything else from the temples, and then they presumably took slaves or uh, and were attempting to expand their own empire with these people they captured. Mm. And apparently Daniel was born in that captivity, just from the words we went over today. Um, I could go back to the genealogy of Daniel to learn more of that. But at this moment, I'm not going to be jumping back and forth to. I'm going to finish focusing on Daniel 6. Uh, Verse 4, then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find none occasion nor fault, for as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. So not only was he charismatic and intelligent, but he had integrity. Whatever dirt they were trying to dig up, they couldn't find any. Verse 5, then said these men, we shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God. Then these presidents and princes assembled together to the king and said thus unto him, King Darius, live forever. All the presidents of the kingdoms, the governors and the princes, the counselors and the captains have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save of thee, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. So apparently they just had a lion den that they kept, presumably for torturing slaves or prisoners or whoever they thought did something rude to the king or other high members of government. uh, so they're trying to build a trap I mean, they're going and flattering the king, which, if you know anything about America uh, and our current president, flattery works pretty well on him, it seems. Not that I have anything against Trump. I think he's reasonably a good president. Um, but he is full of himself, and it's easy to win his favor by flattering him, telling him how great he is. Uh, and that's clearly been the case for a long time, thousands of years, uh, for any king or head of state. Uh, now, so they're trying to make this trap. Uh, Now, verse 8. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing that it be not changed, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. Wherefore King Darius signed the writing and the decree. Verse 10. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime, which sounds like he's Muslim, doesn't it? Isn't that what the followers of Islam do? 3 times a day, uh, pointing toward Mecca. Uh, but Christianity, Islam, and Judaism were all originally, traced back to Abraham. That's why they're called the Abrahamic religions. Um, so clearly there's some customs shared by all of them in some way or another. Because indeed, they, they all believe in one high God, um, at, whether it be Allah, Yahweh, or Jehovah, or just God. Uh, in verse 11, then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. And I'd like to take a moment to talk about supplication. Um, it's just a way of asking God, um, in humility, um, which is how we are supposed to pray for the things that we want from God. Um, I used to think it was not okay to ask God for anything. Uh, that if I needed it, He'd give it to me. If I wanted it but didn't need it too bad, um, and that I should only pray for other people. I was taught that praying for myself was selfish. But later in life, after consulting with a pastor and so forth, I found that I was informed that no, certainly you can pray for anything you want, uh, but do it with humility. Don't say, God, I deserve this, give me this, because I did this and this and this for you, therefore I deserve this. Don't do it like that. Just say, God, if it's okay with you, I know that I don't necessarily deserve or need this, but I sure would appreciate if I might have a little help with my bills this month, or find somebody to be a companion, or I might find a lover or new friends or whatever. Uh, in verse 12, so we see that Daniel's de- defying or breaking the law, um, because he did not wait these 30 days to pray to his God. He did as he did every day, uh, fell on his knees, gave thanks before God, uh, and making supplication. And I'm sure in that order, first thanking God, and then asking for what he wanted. Uh, Verse 12, then they came near and spake before the king concerning the king's decree. Hast thou not signed a decree that every man that shall ask a petition of any god or man within 30 days, save of thee, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, the thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. Then answered they and said before the king, that Daniel, which is of the children of the captivity of Judah, regardeth not thee, O king, nor the decree that thou hast signed, but maketh his petition 3 times a day to God, not to the king. Verse 14, then the king, when he heard these words, was sore displeased with himself, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. Then these men assembled unto the king, and said unto the king, know, O king, that the law of the Medes and Persians is, that no decree nor statute which the king establisheth may be changed. So they devised this trap and succeeded. They caught the king, in a web of his own weaving, basically. They flattered him, got him to sign his paper, and now he's bound by his own word, or signature at least. Uh, Verse 16, then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, thy God, whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. And a stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet, and with the signet of his lords, that the purpose might not be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and passed the night fasting. Neither were instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep went from him. You know, he could not sleep or eat. He was distraught, worried, anxious. Verse 19, then the king arose very early in the morning and went in haste unto the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. And the king spake and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God whom thou servest continually able to deliver thee from the lions? Presumably he's calling out, Daniel, is there any chance that you're still alive? Has God shown, a, a miracle and saved you from these lions? Which I'm assuming they left these lions poorly fed, so they would always be hungry and would, eat whatever they threw in there for them to eat. Verse 21. Then said Daniel unto the king, O king, live forever. My God hath sent his angel, and hath shut the lions' mouths, that they have not hurt me. For as much as before him innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt. Then was the king exceeding glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. And this is a recurring theme all the way up into Jesus, that you, your faith will sustain you and protect you, um, no matter what the problem is. But if you lose faith, you lose that protection and that confidence you can have. Um, just as Peter began to doubt uh, while he was walking on water toward Jesus, and his faith faltered, and Peter began to sink beneath the waves, and Jesus reached out his right hand to him and pulled him up and said, O ye of little faith, why didst thou doubt? Um, and we see many other examples of the same kind of thing. And along with that particular example, we also talked about in Matthew. Um, they were all sailing in the boat together, and Jesus was asleep, just sleeping peacefully, and there goes a storm, and they woke up Jesus in a frenzy, and they, wake up, Rabbi, teacher, uh, it's storming. And Jesus is like, yeah, okay, it does that. What's the problem? But we're going to sing. And he's like, yeah, you continue to doubt. Gosh, why you always doubt? Why you just keep doubting? I don't get it. Just let me turn the storms off if that's what you need to stop running around like chickens with your heads cut off. And Jesus stopped the storm, and they were delivered to the other side of the ocean or sea. I guess be the Sea of Galilee I'm referring to. In any case, um, verse 24, and the king commanded, and they brought those men which had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions, them, their children, and their wives. And the lions had the mastery of them, and brake all their bones in pieces, or ever they came at the bottom of the den. Well, sucks for them. Now, I don't know about the idea of also casting their children and their wives in there too. I don't think I would be that vicious and cruel, but when you're a king, I assume the sanctity of each individual life doesn't seem to be as significant as it is, because we are not all equal according to uh, leaders traditionally. Even in America, I find it very hard to believe that any of the upper tier government officials think that they are no better than the lowliest of us, uh, the poor guy from Alabama that's sitting on here streaming Bible study, um, covering addict and all that. I don't think Trump would consider me to be equal to him. Uh, but me and Trump do have something in common. We get up and go to work every day. Uh, and in that, we are equal. And if you are working, no matter what your job is, I don't happen to be president of the United States, but I have a job. I like my job. I like doing my job because I get to find fulfillment in my job and I get to serve in my job. Valar Doharis. All men must serve. Presidents most of all. In any case, they've destroyed the families of all of those that conspired against Daniel. Verse 25. Then King Darius wrote unto all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, Peace be multiplied unto you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and steadfast forever, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. He delivereth and rescueth, and he worketh signs and wonders in heaven and in earth, who hath delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius, and here's the answer to my question, and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. The kingdom was lost to Belshazzar, son of Nebuchadnezzar, successor to Nebuchadnezzar, uh, through bloody coup, I'm guessing. Yeah, king was killed, Belshazzar was killed, and this seems to be a coup at Darius. Uh, and then Cyrus the Persian. So that puts everything into a little package. There's two chapters. Um, no, we haven't heard about Cyrus the Persian. And indeed, Belshazzar is still king. We're going to stop at this point. And I appreciate everybody that's came through and listened or watched or whatever. Uh, 2 chapters a day seems pretty good. Good way to fill an entire hour. Um, you know, 30 minutes of introduction and disclaimers and stuff of that nature, and then 2 chapters for the most part. When they're short like this, definitely 2 chapters, but some chapters are, 3, 4 times as long as that. Especially if we ever do anything from Genesis, which probably should, in the interest of reminding people to be ever vigilant for like a thief in the night will the second coming be. Uh, but the signs are in place that there's not a lot of time left. Be ever vigilant. So you don't have long to wait. But no man will know the hour. Uh, but we can gather from the prophecy by studying the Bible what to watch for. And that's why I've chosen Daniel. There's a lot of good stuff about not only the coming of Jesus, but even the second coming of Jesus. When he comes in glory, not meek and as a newborn babe. So we will continue on with Daniel 7 in the morning, which is captioned Four Great Beasts, Daniel's Visions, Four Great Beasts. And we'll also do Daniel 8 probably. But for the meantime, let's wrap this thing up and thank you all. I appreciate you swinging by. God bless you all. AK, if you're still there, if not, either way, I'm going to include you in my prayers. And you all have a good day. God bless you.